So hello from Green-Mopeds in London. Today we're taking out the new Niu MQiGT EVO. We've been having a few requests about taking this one out and reviewing it, so today's the day. So this is the flagship model now of the Niu range, I would say. It used to be the MQiGTS Pro, which is now the MQiGTS Extended Range. But this one is more powerful and faster, bigger. However, the N series, the MQiGTS ER, might just pip it on range. And we'll talk about that in a little while. But anyway, if you look on the NIU website, this bike is regarded as the one to replace any 125cc petrol. It has a 5 kilowatt motor, but interestingly, not made by Bosch. Obviously, one of the things that NIU always did from at the outset was have Bosch motors, then they had Panasonic batteries, and then they started introducing EVO batteries. This one has, well, it doesn't say that they're EVO, but they are not Panasonic either. So this is essentially the MQiGT EVO standard range. Whether there'll be an extended range, who knows. Okay, but it is based upon the M series, the MQiGT series, sorry. So this is essentially the 5th model in that lineup. There are two MQiGT Model 30s, which are the 28 mile an hour versions of this bike, and then obviously there's 2 battery versions. There is a Panasonic and there is a non-Panasonic version of that bike. Then there is the MQiGT Model 45, again with the 2 battery options, and that one, as the name suggests, goes 45 miles an hour. So this one is 60 miles an hour. I guess there's a reason to keep the Model 45. Maybe not sure. I mean, the pricing might affect it, and the range again. Okay, so on the NIU website, it talks about colours, for example. There are 8 colours to choose from. We're only getting 4, of which they seem to be going onto the sort of matte colours as the way to go now. So there's a matte black, matte white, grey, and a sort of orangey colour. It weighs 128 kilograms, which is more than any N series, a bit more than the standard MQiGTs, but it's got 72 volt batteries in it. So this is again a departure from the standard MQiGTs. They are 48 volt. Okay, so 72 volt gives you acceleration, pulling away from the lights and all that sort of good stuff. So if that's important to you, having a 72 volt based version rather than the 48 volt 45, for example, would be a better option. Okay, so 72 volt but 26 amp hours. So 26 amp hours is lower than any other NIU bike, but of course there's 2 of them. So the way to actually determine how much sort of battery capacity you've got is to do the maths on the battery, and that will give you its total kilowatt hours. Okay, and then you could look across other bikes and say, well, if it's range I've got, potentially the one with the higher kilowatt hours will have more range or more potential range. Obviously it depends upon how you're combining that with the controller and the motor and all that sort of stuff. But if it's just like saying, you know, this has got a 12-gallon fuel tank, this one's got a 10-gallon fuel tank, therefore potentially it can go further, right? So if you do the maths, so you get 72 times 26, and then there's two of them, you get 3.7 kilowatt hours of energy. Okay. So to compare this to other bikes, lots of people do. We get many people who come in thinking of one bike and leave with another. For example, if you compared this to its nearest rival in terms of power and speed, that is actually the Horwin EK3. Okay, 6.2 kilowatts. This is 6.5 kilowatts max. They both do 60 miles an hour. In fact, the quoted speed of EK3 is 62. This is 60. But it comes with one 72 volt 40 amp hour battery. Okay, so a total of 40 amp hours is obviously less than 26 times 2, 52 amp hours. So therefore, the capacity of this bike is more, and therefore the range should be more. However, of course, the EK3 can have a second battery. Puts the price up, of course, by over £1,000 compared to this bike, but you will then get 72 times 80 amp hours. Okay, so that comes out at 5.6 kilowatt hours versus this 3.7. So again, if it's range and you're prepared to pay the extra money, then 72 times 40 times 2 should be giving you more range than this 72 times 26 times 2. Okay. The other bike typically that this would be compared to is a Super Socko CPX. That is 60 volt but 45 amp hours. Okay, so 60 times 45 with one battery is only 2.7 kilowatt hours. So again, this is 3.7. So again, on paper, this would win out, but that is comparing the dual battery version of this bike to the single battery version of the CPX, and therefore you can add the second battery to the CPX and you get 5.4 kilowatt hours, and therefore the potential for more range is with the CPX. But that will still be £1,000 more than this bike. This is 4,999. This is 4,099. Okay, so it all depends on what it is you're seeking as to whether, on a range perspective, again, a CPX is not as powerful as this bike, only does 56 and not 60, only 5 kilowatt max, this is 6.5, but these are all considerations, I would say, to make. Okay, and that's why we suggest that you should come and try them, and not just look at, the website. Okay, so this one, 3.7 kilowatt hours. If you look at the dashboard, we left with 99%, and it said quoted range 56. Now, we always say that the quoted range is not what you get. Okay, so we will not get, I doubt, 56 miles out of this bike. Quoted range on the spec sheet is 46, and that's with both batteries. I know for a fact, because we've done it, that a single EK3 with a single battery, does 40 miles because we've ridden it, and the quoted range of a single battery CPX is 40, and therefore 30-35. Okay, so the question is, will this actually do 56 miles, or more like 40-45 miles, but with both batteries? Okay, so as I said, it's not purely about looking at X times Y equals Z. It is plus other things on the bike, like the controller, like the motor, etc., etc. Okay. Okay, so 51 miles, 91%. So it's already used 8%, and it went down by 7 miles. That sounds pretty good actually on paper, doesn't it? Because that suggests that it's going to be almost 1 mile per percent, but we're riding it on 30-mile-an-hour roads. When we get to the A3, maybe things will change. Okay, but anyway, that's a bit about range. The other thing that you will probably want to consider is the ability to ride with 1 or 2 batteries. So can I have 1 battery at home being charged? Can I then come home and swap? Some people do that. So one of the things that used to happen, or does typically happen with electric bikes with 2 batteries, is if you ride with just 1 battery, what happens? And typically what happens is the bike says, no, I haven't got enough power in the 1 battery to give you full speed. So what they do is they drop down to 28 miles an hour. Okay, so on this bike they've sort of compromised a little bit. On their other bikes, if you only have 1 battery, it doesn't go into sport mode and you get limited to 28. Okay, that is typical on lots of bikes. Sunrunner doesn't need to, but other bikes that have 2 batteries, typically you drop down to 28 miles an hour. On this bike, they've not dropped you down to 28. You still can't go into sport mode and get the 60 miles an hour, but you can go into dynamic, which means you will get over 40. Okay, so that's obviously a good thing, better than any of the other bikes where you are running with 1 battery. Okay, so as you see, I'm in sport mode right now, but I could be riding in dynamic with 1 battery and have the other battery being charged. Okay, we'll talk more about the dash when we stop on the way back, or when we stop to do our speed test. But suffice to say that NIU have now allowed you to change the layout of the dash. Okay, there is some debate going on, or some misinformation or something like that, where this was sort of announced as the new dashboard for the N series as well. The 2022 models were going to have the new dash as well of the N series. That isn't the case. This is the only bike where you get the new dash. Okay. Also, just as an aside, notice that some dealer websites are stating that this has a Bosch motor and 48 volt batteries, so I think they've confused their MQiGT standard or extended range with this bike. Okay. Alright, but back to charging. So this bike does allow you to charge both batteries off the bike at the same time. Which is, it's not unique. Yadea have just brought out a bike that does this, but it is, other than them, nearly every other bike, you need 2 chargers to charge both batteries off the bike at the same time. So quite a good thing from NIU to have still done that. What we'll do now is we'll just show you what it's like whizzing down the A3, as that's a 70 mile an hour road, and then we'll stop and do our speed test. As I said, mode 1 is 28, mode 2 is high 40s, and then you've got mode sport mode, which will get you the full whack. Okay. What you might have noticed just then is that I caught the hazard lights and then the horn. That is due to how the layout of the dash is, and I'll come back to that. Alright, but here we are, 50 down the A3. As you can see, accelerates quite nicely. We're up to 60 now. Okay, no issues. Silently, of course, because there's no chain or belt or anything like that, but cruising along. So it picks up. I mean, this is in sport mode. I have to say that the starting acceleration from Eco, if you want to do the get away from the lights thing, you probably want to be in sport mode to do that, because Eco mode, the pickup from 0 isn't that good. Okay. But anyway, what we'll do, this is just to show you that it goes okay at speed. What we'll do is we'll come off at the next exit and do what we normally do, and then see how fast it gets to 60. Alright, so be back in a minute. Okay, so here we are for our speed test. So just to show you a bit about the dash, here you see we're in sport mode. Here you see range. As I said, it was at 56 when we started. We've used 20%, and we've just been down one exit on the A3. It's down by 20%. So again, you could say, well, 20% for 10 miles. We tell people not to do this, but we will anyway. 20% for 10 miles, therefore we should get 50. So hopefully that is a reflection of the truth. Said these dash, you have got 3 modes of dash, and we'll go into that on the static review. This little S here means that the batteries are synced, and that is also something that you have to remember when you are riding these bikes. If the batteries are typically 20% or more out from each other, then it will also drop out of sport mode, and you won't be able to do that. Okay, you won't really get into sport mode, and then on this bike you'll be down to high 40s, which might be fine, but it's just something to consider. So around the other front, notice keyless, and one tip that I will give you is do not ride with the key in, even though you can. It fell out because it's not being used to start the bike. There is no ignition done through the key. It is merely to open the seat. So you will be taking the key with you, but do not put it in there, because it fell out when I rode it the other day, and it was just by luck that I found it after I stopped between my feet. So don't do that. Then you've got your USB port, no other storage. There is a bit of storage under the seat for the charger, but nothing else, no other storage at all, and that's that. Okay, so what we'll do, as we always do, is we'll just go 0 to top, and then we'll put the times up later and see how we get on. So I'll just wait for a break in the traffic, and then we'll do that. Okay, let's go. He's gone. 40's gone. 47. 50. 60. Okay, so pretty cool, pretty easy to get to 60. Don't know why it just suddenly said 120 miles an hour flash up there. That was definitely not the case. This bike is obviously new, so there might be some little firmware updates to iron out, but as you saw, I was for an instant doing 120 miles an hour. Not sure what that was all about. But otherwise, I mean, no issues. There it is again. Slight bug on the software, I feel. But yeah, no issues in riding it at that speed. Pretty solid. I mean, this bike is, as I said, 128 kilos. It's got a maximum load of over 270 kilos, as in you plus a passenger plus cargo, if that's what you are wanting to do. And it hasn't got any problem sort of lugging my 85 kilos around, as you can see. So all good. I mean, it's riding at speed, no issues at all. Let's just see if I can reproduce my 120 miles an hour. Yeah, there you go. So 120 miles an hour on the NIU. I don't think so. Yes, definitely a software bug there. Alright, so when we come off onto the quarter part, we will continue and tell you more things about the bike. Okay, be back in a second. Okay, so after doing my 120 miles an hour, we're back on quarter roads. So just some other things about the bike in general. Okay, so and this is across all of the MQiGTs. Okay, One thing that they have done is they have removed foot pegs. They do allow, or they do have, rests for the passenger. We were talking about, taking the passenger just a minute ago. So they do have a footrest for the passenger, which is obviously required, but it's built into the body of the bike, so not pop out. And the only sort of challenge I can see with that is, what if you curb the bike, or knock it over or something like that? It's not just a case then of replacing foot pegs. It's the whole of the bottom belly of the bike, which I'm not sure why they did that. Just from a maintenance perspective, replacing a foot peg. I mean, we've had bikes back from some of these delivery guys, and they are wrecked, foot pegs bent, and all this sort of stuff. And it's just a case of replacing a foot peg, whereas this would be the whole of the bottom of the bike. Obviously, it might never happen, but just something that I did wonder about. The other thing that, if I am to highlight some of the things that I don't like the way the left-hand cluster is set up. As you saw on the earlier, I caught the hazard lights by trying to get to the indicators. Okay, I do not see why they need cruise control and the hazard lights above the indicators. Okay, they say they've got the automatic cancelling of indicators, which is fine, and that's true. But on roundabouts, that won't be used. You're going to be flicking between left and right, or what have you. And as you saw, and this happens on the other MQIs as well, because it's the same layout. You catch the hazard light, and in fact, once I've caught the cruise control, which was interesting, and also obviously the horn. So if it was me, I would have at least moved the indicator button to the top, and the horn and up to beneath that, and then the hazards and the cruise control. I mean, the hazards and the cruise control. Yeah. I mean, after all, how many times do you use your hazard lights? Rarely. The opportunity to use cruise control is pretty rare as well. And the reason I say all this is because what ends up happening is you end up looking for the indicator switch, because you don't want to touch certainly don't want to touch the cruise control, and you don't want to touch the hazard lights, so you end up looking for it, which you shouldn't have to do. Okay, so that's just one sort of niggle. I'm not sure why they couldn't have included some storage at the front. I mean, they've done this little thing here is for the windscreen, if you want a windscreen for it, and the fact that they've got this bolt here, and the fact that it's raised, allows you to put a phone mount on. So obviously you could put your phone mount on here, but if you want any sort of storage, you're into the top box. Okay, so again, pretty standard across most electric bikes. Okay, so that's that. So we've covered pretty much everything. You've seen that it does it 60 miles an hour, as I said, 40, high 40s, even pushing 50 in dynamic, which will be suitable for most people. You can ride around on one battery, which is a good thing, and still get that speed. This dash layout option, okay, it's fine if that's what you want to do. You want to be able to change your dash layout, but what you're probably going to do is just pick one, and then that'll be it. Obviously they have the app, which Niu are sort of famous for in terms of its smart scooter sort of moniker. On the app, you have the ability to do a ride mode where you see on the app a map and your speed and all that sort of stuff. I'm not too sure on whether you would really use that or just stick with Google Maps, because it's not a mapping system as in, I want to go here, take me to it. It is really just showing you the speed and things like that. And in actual fact, it is not connected to the bike. In other words, if you fire up the app and you fire up the Let's Go part of the app and you just start walking away from the bike, it's still recording that you're moving. So it's not a connection to the bike at all. It's just showing you a map with some speed, which of course you could get from Google Maps or any other mapping systems are available. Okay, but you know, the app does do other things. It gives you alerts about the bike. It will it allows you to actually interact with the bike a little bit, so you can start the bike through the app, etc., etc. Other apps do that on other bikes, but it's also, in fact, if it is an app that you're most concerned about, then NIU is the bike, or is the company for an app for their bike. But you shouldn't be buying a bike just for an app anyway, I don't suppose. Okay, so the last thing to talk about is charging time. So NIU do a good job in being able to charge both batteries off the bike, as we said. And if you look at the charger, you'll see it states underneath it output something like 26 amps, might be more. You think, how does that happen out of a 13 amp plug? But what it is possible to get more amps in a charger than 13 amp, and we can talk about that another time maybe. But it doesn't mean that they're charging the batteries at 26 amps. What they actually do is they split that ampage across the two batteries. And in actual fact, if you're charging one battery on its own, you get more ampage into it than if you charge two batteries together. So for example, on the MQiGT standard one, you get 11 amp if you're charging one battery, and then when you put the second one in, it goes to 9 amp. So something in the splitter or the battery is actually dividing the total ampage output across those two batteries. Okay, but it means that again, it's the most powerful charger that we do, or on the bikes that we do, and it's giving you a charging time of like 3 to 4 hours, which is obviously a good thing. One of the things, just as another aside, is when you talk about delivery, what some people need is the ability to ride on one battery and have the other battery be able to be fully charged in the time that it would take them to run out of battery on the bike that they're riding. Okay, so in other words, could you whiz around on a single battery bike and be out delivering or doing whatever for longer than it would actually take you to charge the second battery? Okay, so that is possible on these bikes, on this bike and a CPX actually, that you can have someone out delivering and they could be out for more than 3.5 hours with the amount of range. Obviously if they were doing 60 miles an hour then maybe not, but if they're doing deliveries when they're not doing that sort of thing and they're doing 20 miles an hour because they're in London, then it is possible to have that sort of setup where you can have a rider out, he's riding for 4 hours, by the time he comes back a flat battery is fully charged and he can go out again. Okay, so some of the delivery companies do think about this sort of stuff, or we tell them about this sort of stuff. Okay, anyway, so that's charging. So I guess in summary, so we've been out 35% we've used. As you see, we've been at speed, in fact faster than possible. It started at 56, it's now down to 37. Okay, so and we've actually done 19 miles because it was on 99 when we left. Okay, so 19 plus 37, surprise surprise, is 56. Okay, so interestingly, the range we've done and the miles we've done and the range that are left do actually correlate to 56. Okay, so does that mean we will get 56? We'll have to keep riding it to find out. But we've used 35% in that time. Okay, so we can keep riding it and seeing exactly if we do get the 56 out of it, but of course it depends on, it's pretty cold today, and how we've been riding it, etc., etc. All right, so let's assume it does do 50 miles. That's a good thing, but obviously if you then put the second batteries into the competitors, which is EK3 and CPX, albeit for more money, you will get more range. And of course there is no way of extending range on this bike. You can't add a third battery or what have you. Okay, so if budget's no option and range is your concern, then you might still be looking at a CPX or an EK3 dual battery. We haven't talked about a Silence SO1, simply because from a performance perspective I still would say that that has it, because it's 9 kilowatts. I'll be surprised if it doesn't outperform this bike. But yeah, typically that is £5,800 versus this 4,100, so you know, you are talking a lot more money. But if you just compare the two most obvious contenders, CPX can have two batteries, comes with a rack, has a bit of storage at the front, wheel size the same. Didn't talk about wheel size, but this is 14-inch wheels, front and back dual disc brakes, regen, etc, etc. CPX has all of that. CPX has an app, this has an app. This will beat it on the app in terms of, you know, bells and whistles. Then the EK3, no app, a little bit faster, makes noise because it's got a chain. With one 40 amp hour battery, the capacity of energy is less than this one, but with two, it's obviously more, but again, more money, over £1,100 more, maybe £1,200 more, something like that. But with one battery you do get storage for a helmet, and you do get storage at the front. Okay, so there are considerations. Lower in terms of ride height, this is 81 centimeters seat height. Okay, so this is quite high, and that is actually, we have had some people come and have a look at this bike and it's too big for them. Okay, so I'm 6'1", 185, and as you can see, my knees are fine and I can touch the floor fine. But for some people, touching the floor has been a bit of an issue. Okay, more than tiptoes, to be honest. Okay, so that is also a consideration, but the EK3 would be an alternative in that case. CPX is about the same as this, once you take into account that the seat is quite wide. Okay, but anyway, all in all, apart from that little bug of the software telling me I was doing 120 miles an hour, it rode well. As I said, I don't like the left-hand cluster, but that's the way it is. Alright, so hopefully you found that useful. Obviously this bike is available for a test ride. I'm sure they will solve that little software glitch. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact us in all of the ways possible, including hello@green-mopeds.com. And thanks very much.